A young boy clutched his stomach in pain at a migrant intake facility near the southern border. Nurses assumed it was dehydration until a doctor ordered an X-ray. What he found inside made him freeze. Just one more rupture, and the boy would be dead within hours. The clinic, nestled in the dry outskirts of Texas, had no idea it had just uncovered the start of something far darker. It was 4:17 p.m. on a blistering Thursday afternoon when a faded white transport van pulled up outside the intake gates of the El Rio Border Processing Center, a facility wedged between the parched desert stretches of Arizona and the jagged outline of the Mexico border wall. The vehicle hissed to a stop, releasing a heat wave of metallic tension as the doors creaked open. Inside, nestled between two trembling teenagers and a woman clinging to a toddler, was a boy, no older than 10, whose eyes never stopped scanning. Not the guards, not the clipboards, not the barbed wire above, but the ground. Always the ground. "Name?" the intake officer asked, his voice filtered through both exhaustion and routine. The boy hesitated, then in broken English whispered, "Leo." The officer frowned, glancing at the clipboard in his hand. The manifest said Matthias Lopez, but the handwriting was childlike, letters wobbly and uneven, written in blue ballpoint ink that had already begun to fade from the cheap human paper. No ID, no documents, no verified adult companion. He was a solo minor, the intake sheet noted. The officer, used to the inconsistencies of cross-border identification, didn't press further. Not yet. Leo, if that was his real name, was smaller than the others and thin to the point of translucency. His oversized hoodie hung from his bones like a curtain. As he shuffled through the intake process, refusing juice, declining the rice and beans offered on a plastic tray, he kept his right hand gently pressed to the side of his abdomen. No one asked. There were always kids who were scared, who flinched at the touch of food or people, or even light. In the corner of the intake center, behind a fiberglass wall and muted by a sound-dampening ceiling, Nurse Linda was filling out her third incident report of the day when she glanced through the observation window. She saw Leo sitting on one of the intake benches, head lowered, arms curled over his middle. She almost looked away, until she noticed he wasn't crying. He was counting. His lips moved slightly as his fingers tapped his thigh. 1, 2, 3, pause, start again. 1, 2, 3, Horseshoe made a note to flag his intake file. Solo minor, possible trauma response, abdominal guarding behavior, she wrote. Just enough for a welfare check, just enough to justify keeping an eye on him. Later that night, under the humming fluorescence of Dormitory C, Leo lay on his assigned cot without removing his hoodie or shoes. The other children had begun to murmur his in sleep or swipe tiredly at buzzing flies. A nearby counselor passed by, offering a gentle "Buenas noches." Leo didn't answer. He was curled into himself like a question mark, his left arm cradling his ribs, his eyes wide open. He hadn't eaten all day. At 2:11 a.m., security footage would later show Leo quietly rising, walking barefoot toward the shared restroom. In the hallway, he paused in front of the infirmary door, not entering, just staring. Then he returned to his bed, clutching his stomach as he lay back down. The next morning, when breakfast was served, eggs, toast, and processed sausage, Leo barely touched the food. He asked for only water. When another child offered him a bite of their mango cup, Leo flinched at the scent. He didn't say why. In the medical logs, Nurse Linda scribbled another update. Second meal refusal, protective posture continues, suggest full med intake if symptoms persist. Steele saw marked it for a wellness referral. She had seen this before, trauma, sometimes abuse. But something felt different about Leo. She couldn't name it yet. That afternoon, the intake supervisor reviewed Leo's file again. Something nagged at him. The name mismatched, the inconsistent age reporting. Leo had said 10, but some features suggested he could be older. Still, he was alone, and it wasn't uncommon for families to change names mid-journey, hoping for asylum or reunification. But there was no familial contact listed for Leo. No aunt, no sibling, no trace of anyone looking for him on either side of the border. At 5:32 p.m., Leo was called in for a routine medical screening. He walked in slowly, reluctantly. Nurse Linda greeted him with a soft smile, offering him a lollipop to ease the tension. He refused it. When she lifted his shirt slightly to place the stethoscope on his chest, he flinched sharply, pressing down on his right side. "Does it hurt here?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "How long?" He didn't answer. Dr. Adrian Keller, a pediatrician assigned temporarily to the center, was called in for follow-up. "Let's do an X-ray," he said after a brief exam. "Just in case. Could be gastritis or something worse." Leo's face changed when he heard the word X-ray. Not in fear, but in dread. That night, before the imaging could be done, Leo vomited in the bathroom and collapsed. Security found him curled beside the sink, clutching his abdomen, his face pale and sweating. The emergency team rushed him to the clinic's imaging unit. The X-ray, when it came through, froze Dr. Keller mid-sentence. Inside Leo's abdomen were dozens of opaque, oval-shaped foreign objects. Dozens. And one, just one, had a faint blurred round it, a shadow that didn't match the others. "It's leaking," Keller whispered. "One more, and this boy dies." The clinic room buzzed with the low whir of fluorescent lights and the sharp scent of antiseptic as Dr. Adrian Keller stood frozen, his eyes locked on the screen displaying Leo's abdominal X-ray. The image was unmistakable, even to someone without years of medical experience. Dozens of small opaque ovals, each no larger than a vitamin capsule, were stacked unnaturally along the boy's digestive tract. Dr. Keller leaned closer, adjusting the contrast. 39, he counted aloud, voice low, more to himself than anyone else. Nurse Linda, standing nearby, covered her mouth with her hand, stunned. But what chilled Keller wasn't the number, it was the cloudy, irregular halo surrounding one of the pellets near Leo's lower intestine. "This one's compromised," he said grimly. "We've got a rupture, or it's beginning to leak." Leo, curled on the examination table, was pale and trembling. His hoodie had been removed, revealing a wiry frame marred by bruises faintly visible across his ribs and hips. When Dr. Keller approached, Leo flinched, his eyes darting to the door as though expecting someone to burst through at any second. "Leo," Keller said softly, kneeling to meet his gaze, "do you know what's inside you?" The boy's lips parted slightly. He didn't nod, didn't shake his head. Instead, his pupils dilated with something far worse than pain. Fear rooted deep, the kind not caused by physical illness. Linda handed Keller a syringe with a sedative, prepped for emergency intervention. "We need to stabilize him and call Border Health Enforcement. This isn't just medical, it's criminal." Keller hesitated, then turned back to Leo. "I need to help you, but you have to tell me something. Is anyone trying to hurt you?" Leo's breathing grew shallow. He opened his mouth. Nothing came. Keller leaned closer. "Leo, you're safe here. No one can take you without our say." Then, almost inaudibly, Leo whispered, "Don't let him take me back." Keller's blood turned cold. The words didn't sound like a request. They sounded like a last will. Before Keller could respond, Leo's body went limp. His eyes rolled upward, and his torso convulsed in a violent tremor that threw his thin frame sideways. Alarms blared as Linda rushed to stabilize him, grabbing the crash cart, shouting orders. Keller inserted an IV into Leo's arm, watching as the monitor spiked and dipped erratically. "He's seizing," Linda shouted. "Heart rate unstable, we're losing him." Keller grabbed the oxygen mask, slipping it over the boy's face as another nurse rushed in. "He's overdosing," Keller said, his voice tight. "That pellet, it's leaking opioids, fast-acting, synthetic, might be fentanyl." A cold dread wrapped around the entire room. Keller, hands steady from years of ER chaos, worked quickly. Seconds stretched. The monitor beeped furiously, numbers flickering. Then, gradually, his pulse steadied. Weak, but present. "He's responding," Linda breathed, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Barely." Keller stood, his face grim. "This boy is a mule. Someone forced him to swallow drug capsules." He looked toward the door. "And if that someone is nearby, we've got a much bigger problem." As Leo lay unconscious, Keller scanned the room, thinking quickly. They'd need security, fast. He grabbed his phone and called the internal response unit. "Lock down the clinic," he instructed. "I want security at every exit. No one leaves until this is reported and controlled." Meanwhile, Linda quietly retrieved Leo's belongings, a threadbare backpack that held nothing but a tattered sketchbook and a cracked pen. No toys, no clothes, just pages filled with drawings, jagged black shapes that looked like pills, a faceless man with long arms, and a child curled in a corner. Elsewhere, in the front waiting area, a man in a blue flannel shirt had just entered the building. He looked unremarkable, mid-30s, unshaven, a baseball cap shadowing his features. He approached the reception counter, his voice low and calm. "I'm looking for my nephew. I think he was brought in yesterday," Leo said, typed, unaware of the emergency unfolding 2 corridors away. "Let me check the intake list," she replied. Back in the examination room, Leo's breathing had evened out, though his skin remained cold. Dr. Keller was documenting the rupture site, outlining the position of the other capsules, trying to determine how much time they had. "We'll need imaging guidance to prep extraction," he muttered. "This isn't sustainable. He'll start leaking again if we don't act fast." The door creaked open as a security guard stepped in, responding to Keller's earlier call. "We've got a man asking about a boy named Leo," he said. "Says his family." Keller stiffened. "Nobody talks to him. Not yet. Detain him until federal response arrives." He glanced at Leo's frail body. "He said don't let him take me back. I think we just found out who him is." In the hallway, the man was growing restless. "I'm his uncle. He's been sick. I just want to make sure he's okay." His fingers tapped nervously on the reception desk. A flash of something dark slipped across his eyes. Control, or perhaps fear that time was running out. The receptionist, oblivious, offered a forced smile. "We'll check on his status." Back in the clinic room, Leo stirred slightly. His eyelid fluttered. Keller leaned down. "Leo, can you hear me?" No response. He turned to Linda. "Get toxicology and prepare a transfer vehicle. We may need to move him to a better-equipped facility." And then, from the monitor cart, a soft chirp. It vanished as quickly as it came. Keller's jaw tightened. This wasn't just about one boy. There were more, and someone knew they'd been seen. The next move had to be precise. One wrong step, and Leo wouldn't be the only casualty. In the narrow administrative wing of the El Rio Border Processing Center, the air had grown noticeably tenser since the internal lockdown was issued. Dr. Keller stood outside the triage room, arms crossed, mind racing as he stared at the closed door where Leo lay sedated under close observation. Security guards were posted at both ends of the hallway, and Keller had just finished uploading the X-ray images and the permetherating toxicology data into the secure federal reporting system. Everything now depended on how fast Border Health Enforcement and the Department of Homeland Security responded. But before those agencies could act, the man at the reception desk made his move. He was brought into the interview room under protocol review, escorted by 2 guards who had received minimal information, only that a child in their custody was in critical condition and that this man might be connected. He introduced himself as Rafael Torres, claiming to be Leo's maternal uncle. Dressed in a plaid flannel shirt, work boots, and faded jeans, he looked every bit the hard-working migrant he professed to be. In calm, measured Spanish, he explained that Leo had crossed the border recently to reunite with family after his mother passed away. "He has a stomach ulcer," Rafael said matter-of-factly, waving dismissively at the mention of hospitalization. "It's not serious. He gets scared easily. Let me take him home." The intake officer raised an eyebrow. "We don't have any confirmation of your guardianship," he said. "You're not listed on any of the intake forms, and the child didn't mention any relatives." Rafael didn't flinch. "He's a quiet boy. His mother told him not to talk to strangers. She died a month ago." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a well-worn photo of a woman holding a younger version of Leo. The picture, aged and grainy, showed a child whose features bore a vague resemblance to the boy in the clinic bed. Dr. Keller was brought into the room to assess the man's claim. He studied Rafael carefully, noting the crispness of his responses, the lack of overt nervousness, and yet the undercurrent of something rehearsed. "We've stabilized the boy," Keller said professionally. "But he's in no shape to be released. He's suffered a medical crisis consistent with narcotic exposure. He's got foreign bodies in his digestive tract that could kill him." Raphael raised both hands as if in disbelief. "That's not possible," he said quickly. "He's 10. He plays soccer. Maybe he swallowed something weird. But I can take him to a private clinic in Nogales. I know people there." Keller pressed on. "When did you last see him?" Raphael's eyes flicked left. "A few weeks ago?" Keller didn't respond immediately. He turned to the officer. "Run his ID and take a fingerprint just in case." Raphael laughed nervously. "That's not necessary. I came voluntarily. I just want to take my nephew home." The fingerprint scan took less than 10 minutes. The results, however, brought silence. The officer stepped out of the room, glanced at Keller, and handed him a printed sheet. Keller read the top line and felt his breath catch. Rafael Torres had a sealed file under another alias, Mateo Diaz. He had been a named suspect in a 2016 federal investigation into cross-border child trafficking. Accused of coordinating the smuggling of undocumented minors using false family claims and forged papers, Mateo had walked free due to lack of physical evidence. His fingerprints had not been conclusively tied to any specific scene. Until now. Keller motioned for the head of security. "Detain him. Do not let him near the child." Inside the interview room, Rafael Mateo remained seated, his posture calm but his fingers twitching subtly. When officers returned and informed him they would need to ask more questions, his expression shifted imperceptibly. "Am I being arrested?" he asked. "You said I could help." "You're not under arrest," the officer said diplomatically, "but we do need clarification. A lot of it." In the security hub, Keller reviewed Leo's medical chart once more. There were now 3 confirmed indicators: the presence of synthetic opioids in the boy's blood, the partial rupture of a smuggling pellet, and now an alleged trafficker showing up as his uncle within 48 hours. It was no coincidence. Meanwhile, Raphael, still sitting quietly, pulled out a slip of paper from his wallet and attempted to discreetly swallow it. A guard spotted the movement and intervened. The crumpled note was retrieved and unfolded, an address scrawled in Spanish, GPS coordinates, and a name: Valeria. It matched none of the intake records, but Keller's mind raced. What if Leo wasn't the only one, he muttered to himself. Just then, Nurse Linda emerged from the clinic hallway, her face pale. "He's waking up," she said softly, "and he's asking for you." Keller followed her quickly into the room. Leo's eyes were half open, unfocused but alert. His breathing was shallow, his voice a rasp. "He came, didn't he?" he whispered. "The man with the hat." Keller nodded gently. "Yes, he said is your uncle." Leo blinked slowly. "But he's not. He took us. From Juarez. Said we'd get to see America. Then the pills. I didn't want to, but he said if I didn't, Valeria would disappear." Keller crouched beside the bed. "Who's Valeria?" Leo's lips trembled. "My sister." And with that, he slipped back into semi-consciousness, too weak to continue. "We need to find her, now." But he knew Rafael Mateo wouldn't give her up easily. Not without leverage, not without a plan, and they were running out of time. The quiet hum of medical monitors filled the air as Dr. Keller stood by Leo's bedside, watching over the boy with the kind of focus only a physician under fire could sustain. It had been less than an hour since Leo had whispered about Valeria and collapsed again into fragile unconsciousness, and the atmosphere around the triage wing of the El Rio Clinic had grown thick with urgency and something darker: paranoia. A call had been made to Homeland Security, who assured Keller that a specialized child trafficking task force was en route, but with no timeline and no definitive authority yet on site, the clinic remained in a limbo of self-imposed lockdown. Inside the room, Leo's vitals were being maintained by a steady IV drip, delivering a calculated mix of hydration, pain control, and mild sedation. Nurse Linda and 2 others were rotating shifts to monitor him constantly. But it was during the quietest hour, just past midnight, that something went wrong. Nurse Tara, a recently hired night shift assistant, was checking the chart at the station outside Leo's room when she noticed a subtle flicker on the bedside monitor. The IV flow had stopped, not slowed, not fluctuated, stopped entirely. She rushed in, checking the line. Her heart sank, The tubing connecting Leo's IV had been cleanly detached, the locking port still sealed, as if someone with knowledge of procedure had deliberately and silently disconnected it. Tara immediately reattached the IV, flushing the line and confirming the reflow, but something else gnawed at her. She checked the log, which should have time-stamped every vitals dip. The data had a blank span, 12 minutes with no entry, as if the system had been put to sleep. She informed Linda, who took one look at the port and nodded grimly. "This wasn't accidental," she said. "This was surgical." Dr. Keller was called in and reviewed the data. No sign of needle slips, no bruising on the arm. Whoever did this knew how to avoid triggering alarms. He looked at Tara. Who else was on the floor between midnight and now? Tara hesitated. "Just me, the janitor, and a float nurse from the temporary relief roster." "Dr. Mills authorized her rotation earlier today," Keller frowned. "Dr. Mills? He hasn't been active on our clinic roster since 2 years ago." Tara blinked. "Well, the log shows his signature code authorizing the schedule change." That's when the realization hit. Keller raced to the admin terminal, logging into the internal staff tracking dashboard. He opened the access logs, searching by staff ID. There it was, Mills 89, timestamp 11:42 p.m. That ID shouldn't even exist anymore. Dr. Douglas Mills had died in a car crash 2 years prior, a fact Keller knew well. He had attended the man's funeral. "Get me the security camera logs," Keller said to the tech on duty. "Every feed from the triage hall, med bay, corridor, anything between 11:30 and 12:30. The tech pulled up the archives and clicked through. The footage loaded cleanly until precisely 11:59 p.m., at which point the screen pixelated into static. When the video returned at 12:16 a.m., it skipped directly to Tara walking into Leo's room to check the IV. 17 minutes, Keller murmured. 17 minutes of blackout during the exact window of the IV disruption. He scanned the metadata. Restart command detected. Access from internal network node E13, registered under administrative override. The overrover belonged to one name, Mills. At the nurse's station, Linda reviewed the medication log and found an additional anomaly. Someone adjusted his sedative dosage downward, she said. It wasn't logged properly, just an unsigned overread on the system. He was supposed to be under deep sedation, but someone wanted him to feel everything. Keller clenched his jaw. Someone inside the system, and they know we're onto something. The rest of the night blurred into controlled chaos. Security reviewed every badge entry in and out of the building. Most checked out, except for one, a utility access badge used in the South Wing, which hadn't been issued in over a year. When they traced it physically, it was missing from the retired badge drawer in HR, requisitioned by Mills 2 nights ago. Tara, now visibly shaken, mentioned one more detail she hadn't realized was important. "There was a woman I didn't recognize who came to restock the medicine cabinet during the blackout. She had a badge, but she didn't make eye contact." "I assume she was float staff," Keller asked sharply. "Did she go near the patient?" Tara nodded. "I think so, but it was only for a second. They brought in the badge logs and cross-recognition. No match was found for the supposed nurse. The badge she used had belonged to a retired oncology nurse who had moved to Chicago last year." "Someone's staging this," Keller said. "They're inside our system using dead credentials, retired IDs. They knew we'd be too focused on Leo to notice for a few hours." He looked at Linda. "This is more than a trafficking case. It's organized, surgical, and they've done this before." Meanwhile, Leo stirred again. His eyes fluttered. Keller leaned over, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "Leo, you're safe, but I need your help. Do you remember anything about the person who made you swallow those pills?" Leo's lips moved without sound. Then he whispered, "The woman in the red coat. She gave me water. I didn't want to drink it." Keller's heart sank. "Did she hurt you?" Leo didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, "She told me to be still. She said if I moved, they'd take Valeria." Keller stood, mind reeling. "They've got a handler inside, maybe more than one, and they're trying to clean up." He looked at Linda, eyes hardening. "If we don't act now, they'll either disappear her or come back to finish what they started." He didn't say the rest out loud, but everyone in the room understood it. They weren't just up against a trafficker. They were facing a network with tentacles deep inside the infrastructure, one that knew how to erase evidence, alter records, and reset cameras without leaving fingerprints. And the next move might be more lethal than unplugging an IV. The weight of what had happened overnight pressed heavy on Dr. Keller's chest as the sun began to rise beyond the desert horizon, casting long orange streaks across the sterile clinic floors. The security breach, the manipulated badge system, the ghost of a dead doctor, authorizing access. None of it made sense on its own, but together it painted a picture more sinister than any trafficking case he had handled in his years practicing near the border. While he prepared for an emergency consult with Homeland's task force, Keller stepped outside the triage area for a brief moment to clear his head. It was there he ran into Dr. Naomi Greenfield, a veteran ER physician who had been stationed at El Rio before transferring to the main hospital in Tucson, but had returned temporarily to assist during the recent surge of border admissions. Her face was tight with concern, and her voice low. "Adrian," she began without preamble, "what's going on with that boy in triage?" Keller hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, but Greenfield cut him off. "Look, I know the signs, and this isn't the first time. You're not the only one who's seen this." Keller's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Naomi glanced around, then pulled him into a side corridor, lowering her voice. "Last year, when I was covering the late shift during a migrant intake surge, we got 2 kids, maybe 8-9 years old, brought in unconscious. Same symptoms. Pale, low pulse, distended abdomen. The scans showed objects in their digestive tract. The attending was going to report it, but the next morning the entire case file was gone. Paperwork, imaging, even the intake logs. It was like those kids had never existed. When I asked questions, I was told it was a clerical error." She paused, eyes locking with Keller's. "You know how hard it is to erase an entire ER record from 3 systems? Someone had admin clearance. Deep clearance." Keller felt the chill in his spine return. "Do you remember anything about the kids? Names? Where they were from?" Naomi shook her head. "That's the thing. They didn't talk. They were scared out of their minds. But I remember one of them had a bandage on his forearm. Fresh puncture, too clean to be accidental." "Like an injection site," Keller nodded slowly. "This kid, Leo, said something about a woman in a red coat, said she made him drink something. Now we've got an IV tampering case, badge acts, and someone trying to take him back." Naomi leaned closer. "Adrian, whatever this is, it's organized. And it's not just drugs, it's deeper. You said you ran toxicology." Keller nodded. "Preliminary results came back with traces of synthetic opioids, mostly fentanyl variants, but I had them send one of the partially ruptured pellets to Tucson's forensic lab." He glanced at his phone, which vibrated at that moment. A message flashed on the screen. "Subject, sample anomaly detected. Contact immediately." They rushed into Keller's office and opened the secured email link. The message from the forensic tech read, "Pellet shows dual compartment design. Outer layer is drug-based synthetic opioid mix. Inner core contains polymer-sealed microcircuitry. Suspected nano-GPS or temekrity device. Not typical cartel design. Appears custom military grade. Lab suggests external contractor involvement." Naomi exhaled sharply. "They're not just using kids to smuggle. They're tracking them, monitoring their internal payloads in real time." Keller's eyes scanned the report again. "This means they're watching every step of the way." Naomi pointed to the note about microsensors. "This would explain why they panicked when you x-rayed him. They knew the moment you broke the visual barrier." Keller stood abruptly. "Sarah, need to get this to Homeland now. These kids are being used like drones, biological carriers equipped with smart surveillance." As they forwarded the findings to the federal task force, an encrypting channel opened. A Homeland officer responded almost instantly. "We're sending agents. ETA 20 minutes. Do not move the child. Do not transfer. Trust no one." Meanwhile, back in the triage room, Nurse Linda was adjusting Leo's monitors when he opened his eyes again, his gaze clearer this time. He stared at the ceiling, then turned to her. "Watches," he said softly. "Even now?" Linda leaned down. "Who watches, Leo?" He swallowed hard. "The man with no face. On the screen. He said if I ran, they'd find us. He sees everything." Even when I closed my eyes, Linda glanced at the monitor readings. They were steady, but his anxiety was peaking. "You're safe here," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she believed it anymore. Keller re-entered, followed by Naomi, who nodded gently at Leo. "Hey, champ," she said. "We're going to take care of you." But Leo shook his head slowly. "They already know where I am. You saw the pills. That means they saw you too." Keller knelt beside him. "How do they see, Leo?" The boy pointed to his stomach. "It's in there. That's how they find us. And they talk to each other through it." "He knows about the chip." Keller looked at her, then back to Leo. "Did they put anything else inside you?" Leo closed his eyes, his voice faint. "They said it would make me special. Hard to lose, hard to kill." Before Keller could respond, the clinic lights flickered, then a soft chime rang through the overhead system. Unusual. The clinic didn't use hourly alerts. Keller's phone buzzed with a system message. "Unscheduled network ping detected. Internal device attempting encrypted handshake." With a nailbox, someone's trying to find him right now. They pulled Leo's medical chart and traced the internal device registry. Sure enough, one of the pellet barcodes had been scanned into the med database, automatically uploaded by the imaging software, and from there it had pinged an IP in Eastern Europe, disguised behind multiple VPN layers. Naomi turned to Keller, her voice tight. "They're not just tracking him, they're testing something. This isn't just smuggling, this is operation." Keller stared at the screen, the blinking red dot where Leo's last scan had been uploaded. "He's the test run," he said. "The prototype." The blinking red dot on the screen pulsed like a warning, a heartbeat echoing from some distant place where the people behind all this watched their victims like pieces on a chessboard. Dr. Keller's mind raced as the implications sank in. Leo wasn't just a child in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was part of something, built with terrifying precision. Naomi had begun making calls to external cybercrime contacts, trying to trace the network traffic from the clinic's compromised systems, but every lead was rerouted through anonymous proxies. It was like chasing shadows. Back in the triage room, Leo's heart monitor ticked steadily, but his consciousness was unstable, drifting in and out under the strain of both physical and psychological trauma. As Linda wiped a damp cloth across his forehead, he mumbled something in Spanish, fragmented and hard to catch. She leaned closer, straining to understand, then called Keller over. "He's saying names, places. I think... they're codes?" Keller stepped in, crouched beside the bed again, and gently took Leo's hand. "Can you say that again, buddy?" The boy's eyes fluttered, unfocused. "Blue Sun, Caravan 8, Raphael said we were cargo, like shipping, but breathing." His voice cracked. "I hid in the trucks, behind the powder. I waited for night." Keller and Naomi exchanged a look. "He escaped," Naomi said. "He got away from whatever that convoy was," Keller nodded. "But how?" They recorded his mutterings, catching more fragments. "She wore the cross, but her neck was full of lies. They took Valeria first, said I'd see her again, if I did the drink, swallowed the glass moon." Naomi scribbled down the phrases. "Glass moon," she repeated aloud. Keller's breath caught. "That's how the pellets looked in the X-ray. Glowing, round, smooth. He's describing what they made him swallow." Leo shifted again, muttering. "Don't call me Leo. That's not me. That's what they gave me." "Leo 729. Naomi froze. "That's a tag, a designation." Keller pulled up the intake files and overlaid them with archived Homeland memos. Sure enough, there had been past reports, uncorroborated, of a covert network trafficking unaccompanied minors under the guise of a humanitarian escort. They used non-nurse shells, appearing as mobile clinics or refugee aid groups, offering protection and processing services to desperate families trying to flee violence. But instead of sanctuary, the children were sorted, tagged, and rerouted, each given a code, a name to replace their own. Names like Leo, numbers like 729. Naomi reviewed a redacted document from a 2019 DHS report marked class/incomplete. Project Glass Halo, she read. Suspended in 2020 due to lack of prosecutable evidence. Keller stared at the phrase. Glass Halo, Glass Moon. It's the same language." Leo stirred again, clutching his side in pain. "She said it would only hurt the first time, that after that I'd be strong enough." He opened his eyes slowly, meeting Keller's gaze. "But I ran. I wasn't supposed to. I saw the trucks lined up by the water tanks. I waited until they were counting. I slipped under the fence. But they said they'd find me, even if I was just numbers." Keller squeezed his hand gently. "You're not numbers. You're real. We know what they're doing, and we're going to stop them." The room fell quiet except for the beeping of machines until Naomi's tablet buzzed with a new message from a DHS analyst. The subject line read, "Leo 729 matched. Subnet recovered dump attached." She opened the file and her stomach dropped. It was a list of children, names, fake aliases, numerical tags, last known GPH coordinates, and status updates. Leo 729 was listed as active, ASC, NPHERET, do not detain. Valeria, 834, restricted hold. PSA, pen. Naomi handed the tablet to Keller. They kept tabs on every single one. "It's a logistics manifest. These kids aren't just victims, they're inventory." Keller's jaw clenched, and Leo was never a name. It was a barcode. They shared the file with the arriving Homeland agents, who were already sealing off the clinic's network and copying every server drive. Meanwhile, Leo dozed again, but the tension in his body never fully relaxed. In his sleep, he whispered other things, about cold tables, bright lights, voices without faces, about the girl who used to braid his hair when they slept under tarps, and how her hands were shaking the night they separated her. Naomi, watching the child struggle against memories he didn't yet know how to frame, asked quietly, "If this is only one boy, how many others are still in the system, still being moved?" Keller didn't answer immediately. His mind was still on that list, still picturing a convoy of white vans painted with the logos of charities that didn't exist, still hearing Leo's voice saying, "I wasn't supposed to have a name." He turned to the agents and said flatly, "We need to find Valeria before she becomes just another phase in their system." But even as he said it, Keller knew time was against them. Somewhere in the shadow networks that disguised themselves as hope, a countdown had already started, and Valeria 834 was still tagged as pen. The file from DHS confirmed everything Dr. Keller and Naomi feared. Leo wasn't just a case. He was a node in a living system of trafficking, a cog in a logistics network masquerading as humanitarian aid. The facility had been locked down under the federal directive, and Homeland agents took positions throughout the clinic perimeter. Still, Dr. Keller couldn't shake position that they were already too late. Systems like this didn't get exposed without repercussions, and someone somewhere had likely received a notification the moment Leo's chip had been scanned and cross-referenced. That suspicion grew stronger when one of the night shift receptionists reported an emergency responder arriving at 3:17 a.m., claiming to be dispatched from a nearby facility with orders to transport a high-risk minor patient under trauma watch. The respondent wore standard EMT gear, carried credentials that scanned clean through the on-site verification portal, and had a forged badge from Border Health Authority. No one questioned him at first. The staff had seen emergency transfers before, especially when DHS was involved. Naomi was reviewing surveillance footage from the side hallway near triage when she noticed the man enter without logging a departure order. "Wait," she said, pausing the video. "That's not protocol. All emergency transports must have paper documentation. And he didn't check in with any of us." Dr. Keller watched the screen as the man turned left toward Leo's room, walking with the calm precision of someone who knew exactly where to go. His left hand carried a black medical case. "Linda's with Leo right now," Keller muttered, bolting from the security room. Inside the triage bay, Leo lay sedated, stable, but vulnerable. The man entered silently, opening his case with methodical speed. He pulled out a capped syringe and adjusted the dosage with practiced efficiency. Linda, the senior nurse, stood frozen for a moment when she saw him. "I wasn't notified of any," she began, but the man cut her off. "Federal directive, high alert case, DHS dispatch authorized this. The child needs to be moved now. Possible retaliation risk." He spoke with authority, but didn't meet her eyes. That alone set off alarms in her instincts, honed by decades in critical care. "Where's your documentation?" she asked again, this time firmer. He ignored her, drawing closer to the bed. "Step aside, nurse," he said, lifting the syringe. What happened next unfolded in seconds. Linda stepped between him and the bed, blocking his path. "I said, you're not touching him without showing me your paperwork." The man's mask dropped, his eyes narrowed, and with no further warning, he lunged forward, grabbing her arm and attempting to push her aside. But Linda didn't fall. Instead, she moved with a speed that belied her age. She twisted out of his grip and drove her elbow into his side, knocking the syringe from his hand. "I've seen your kind before," she spat, grabbing a scalpel from the emergency tray and holding it between them. "You think this is the first time I've had someone try to steal a child from my floor?" Dr. Keller burst through the door seconds later, followed by a Homeland agent. The fake medic spun, trying to reach for something in his belt, but the agent had already drawn his sidearm. "Hands up, on the ground," the agent barked. The man froze, calculating, then dropped to his knees slowly, his hands raised. Linda stood shaking, but didn't lower the scalpel until Keller placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Once the man was cuffed and taken away, the room calmed, briefly. Linda sat down, her breathing uneven, and Naomi knelt beside her. "Are you okay?" she asked. Linda didn't respond at first. She stared at the floor, then whispered, "I knew the look in his eyes. I've seen it before." Keller and Naomi exchanged a glance. "What do you mean?" he asked quietly. Linda looked up at them, and for the first time she seemed smaller, younger, like a memory had overtaken her present. 18 years ago, she began. "I was 13. My parents died in Guatemala. A missionary group took me in. They promised food, safety, education, but it wasn't a mission. It was a pipeline. They moved kids through freight containers, called us transits. We didn't have names, just numbers on stickers." Naomi's eyes widened. "You were one of them?" Linda nodded slowly. "I escaped during a transfer in El Paso. I jumped from the back of a truck and hid in a drainage tunnel for 2 days. A farm worker found me and turned me in. I spent the next year in juvenile protection custody. They couldn't verify anything, no records, no proof, so I was placed in the system. Given a new name, I chose Linda because it sounded gentle." Keller sat down across from her, stunned. "You've been here this whole time?" Linda gave a bitter smile. "I became a nurse because I thought if I was close to the children, I might see them again, or stop it from happening to someone else. But I never thought I'd see that look again. Until now." Outside, the captured man refused to speak under interrogation. His fingerprints didn't match any known identity, and his equipment was untraceable. No phone, no ID, no GPS history. It was like he didn't exist. But the syringe he carried contained a combination of a paralytic and a memory-blocking sedative, enough to disable a child without leaving immediate signs of trauma. Homeland confirmed the mix matched a pattern found in other black site disappearances tied to known trafficking routes in northern Mexico. Inside Leo's room, the boy stirred again, eyes fluttering as if waking from a deeper place than sleep. He opened them slowly and whispered, "Is she here?" Naomi leaned down. "Who, sweetheart?" Leo blinked at Linda. "The one who stopped him. She's like me. I remember her from the road." Linda's hand trembled. "No, you don't," she said softly, but Leo nodded. "You were in the blue van. You sang to us when we cried." Keller's breath caught. "He recognized you." The air in the hospital was thick with tension. Dr. Keller, Naomi, and Linda knew they had little time. The failed abduction attempt had confirmed their worst fears. The trafficking network was aware of their interference and would stop at nothing to retrieve Leo. They needed to act swiftly. Linda, drawing from her past experiences, suggested an escape route through the old medical basement, a part of the hospital long forgotten and unused. She remembered it from her early days at the hospital, a labyrinth of corridors that once served as storage and emergency pathways. Under the cover of darkness, they prepared for their descent. Leo, though weak, managed to sit up with assistance. His eyes, though tired, held a spark of determination. Naomi gathered essential medical supplies, ensuring they had everything needed for the journey. Dr. Keller secured the necessary documents and any evidence they had collected. Linda led the way, her memories guiding them through the maze-like corridor. As they navigated the dimly lit passageways, the sounds of the hospital above faded, replaced by the echoing footsteps and distant drips of water. The air grew cooler, and the walls bore the marks of time, peeling paint, rusted pipes, and faded signs pointing to long-defunct apartments. Their path was illuminated only by the faint glow of emergency lights and the occasional beam from their flashlights. After what felt like hours, they reached a heavy metal door. Linda hesitated, recalling that beyond it lay a tunnel, rumored to connect to various parts of the city. With a deep breath, she pushed it open. The tunnel stretched into darkness, its walls lined with old cables and pipes. They proceeded cautiously, the weight of their mission pressing heavily upon them each time they picked it. They paused, straining to identify its source. Following the sound, they discovered a side chamber. Inside, the sight that greeted them was both shocking and heartbreaking. Rows of hospital beds, each occupied by a child, lay in the dim light. Monitors beeped steadily, and IV lines connected to their small arms. The children appeared sedated, their faces peaceful yet unnaturally still. Naomi rushed to the nearest bed, checking the child's vitals. "They're alive," she whispered, relief evident in her voice. Dr. Keller examined the setup, noting the presence of unfamiliar equipment and substances. "These aren't standard medical procedures," he muttered. Linda, her face pale, recognized the signs. "They're preparing them," she said, her voice trembling, "just like they did with me." Realization dawned upon them. This was a staging area, a hidden facility where the trafficking network prepared children for transport. The implications were horrifying. They needed to act, but the risk was immense. Any wrong move could alert the traffickers and endanger not only themselves, but the children as well. They exchanged determined glances, understanding the gravity of their discovery. Their mission had evolved from escape to rescue. Dr. Keller stared at the rows of unconscious children, the blinking monitors casting a rhythmic glow against the cold concrete walls of the underground chamber. He felt a surge of rage twist in his chest, an overwhelming mix of helplessness and resolve. They couldn't leave these kids behind, not again. Naomi moved quickly among the beds, checking pulses, confirming vitals, whispering reassurances even though none of the children could respond. Linda stood frozen by the entrance, her face pale, her breathing shallow. "This is exactly what they did before," she said, voice cracking. "Except now they've upgraded. It's not just about smuggling anymore. It's systematized." Keller knew she was right. The room was too clean, too organized, the equipment too precise. This wasn't a random operation. This was industrialized human trafficking. He pulled out his phone, his hand trembling. "They'll deny it," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "Even if we bring the agents, they'll hide it before they get here." Naomi looked over. "What are you doing?" "We're going to make this impossible to cover up," Keller said, opening the camera app and hitting Go Live. Within seconds, his phone connected to his encrypted backup account on a decentralized social media platform used by humanitarian activists. The live stream began, capturing every horrific detail: the unconscious children, the IVs, the masked operating equipment, the narrow underground path. "This is Dr. Adrian Keller at El Rio Border Clinic," he said clearly, "and what you are seeing is a hidden trafficking chamber beneath a federally monitored facility. These children have been drugged, implanted, and are awaiting forced body-packing procedures." Naomi gasped softly as the viewer count began to rise, first a dozen, then hundreds, then thousands. Comments began pouring in multiple languages, angry, shocked, demanding answers. Some were skeptics, but most were horrified. Keller moved his camera across the chamber, focusing on the numbered tags attached to each bed, the strange medical tools, the unjustified fluids. "We don't know how many facilities like this exist," he continued, "but this one is real, and it is operational now. We need help. We need law enforcement, media, human rights investigators, immediately." He handed the phone to Naomi. "Keep filming. Don't stop, not until someone breaks this." Meanwhile, Linda moved to a smaller bed in the far corner, where a girl of about 10 lay motionless. She was more lightly sedated than the others, her eyes fluttering faintly. Linda whispered her name softly from the patient tag, "Valeria." The girl stirred, Keller rushed over, kneeling by the bed as the girl slowly opened her eyes. Her voice was hoarse. "Where's Leo?" she whispered. Keller blinked. "You know Leo?" Valeria nodded weakly. "He's my brother, my twin. They took him when we were 3. I remember the fence. I remember them pulling us apart." Keller felt his heart drop. "You're Valeria 3 he said slowly. "You're the one Leo's been trying to find." Naomi lowered the phone slightly, stunned. "They're siblings?" Keller looked back at Leo, who was standing now, supported by Linda. His eyes were wide as he stared at the girl on the bed. "She braided my hair," he said faintly. "She called me Matthias." Linda's hand flew to her mouth. "His name isn't Leo, it's Matthias." "It was never just a code," Valeria's lip trembled. "I thought they'd killed you," she whispered. "Told me if I ever asked again, they'd do to me what they did to the others." Naomi quickly turned the phone toward them, capturing the moment of recognition, the emotional reunion even through the pain. The live stream exploded, comments flew across the screen, hashtags formed in real time. "Find Matthias, save Valeria," and the pipeline. Somewhere in the chaos, emergency responders began pinging the stream. Journalists joined, verified profiles started sharing the video. One high-profile news anchor tweeted, "This is real. We're verifying location now. If this is true, this is the largest child trafficking leak in U.S. history." In the background, sirens began to sound, faint at first, but growing louder. The feed had reached the right people, the right ears, but Keller knew it also reached the wrong ones. Somewhere, whoever ran this operation would be watching the same stream, and they would come to shut it down. The window of escape was closing rapidly. The sound of sirens grew louder, echoing through the underground tunnel like a storm breaking through stone. Dr. Keller, Naomi, Linda, and Leo Matthias stood protectively around the sedated children as Valeria tried to sit up, her weak voice barely above a whisper. Naomi wrapped her arms around the girl and whispered reassurances, while Keller moved toward the tunnel entrance to signal the response team. Within minutes, the heavy steel door burst open and armed agents in full tactical gear poured in, identifying themselves as FBI and Homeland Security. Their leader, a woman with sharp eyes and a clipped voice, surveyed the scene, absorbing the gravity in a single breath before issuing rapid-fire orders to her team. Medics rushed in with stretchers, sweeping across the rows of children with practiced urgency. One by one, they began lifting the unconscious victims, stabilizing them and tagging their identities based on Keller's makeshift documentation. Keller turned to the lead agent. "This place, this entire operation, is built under what used to be a rehabilitation center. The clinic above was just the bait. They've been funneling kids through here for years." The agent nodded grimly. "We've been tracking satellite chatter and deep web movements for months. Your stream just gave us the visual evidence we needed. You opened a door none of us could kick down before." Keller pointed toward Valeria. "She's the key. She and Matthias were separated as infants. Their records were wiped. She remembers faces, details. She can help us map the pipeline." The agent gave a nod of approval, then gestured for more agents to clear the way. As the children were evacuated, Valeria reached for her brother's hand. Matthias gripped it tightly, tears silently rolling down his cheeks. The pain etched into their features was mirrored in Linda's, who stood watching with a mixture of sorrow and vindication. Hours later, the entire facility had been cleared. Dozens of children were transported to protected medical sites. The old hospital complex was sealed off as evidence, and Homeland agents began a systematic takedown of associated shell organizations, charities, and routing companies. The live stream had gone viral. Every major news outlet ran stories under banners like "Children of the System" and "Pipeline Beneath the Border." Faces of missing children began appearing in national broadcasts. Parents from across the country called tip lines in hope and fear. And through it all, Matthias stayed beside his sister, rarely speaking, only watching, always alert. In the days that followed, he underwent the surgery needed to remove the remaining foreign bodies in his abdomen. It was long, delicate, and uncertain, but Dr. Keller stayed at his side the entire time. Linda refused to leave the hospital either, sitting vigil in the recovery room like a sentinel from the present. When Matthias finally awoke, groggy but stable, he blinked at Keller through glassy eyes. "Did we get out?" he asked. Keller smiled softly. We did. You're safe now. The boy nodded slowly and whispered, What about the others? Keller placed a hand on his shoulder. They're safe too, and you helped make that happen. A month passed. The media storm calmed, though investigations continued behind the scenes. Dozens of arrests were made across multiple states and countries. New leads opened into similar underground networks, and for once there was a coordinated response. Keller, after long meetings with federal agencies and social services, formally submitted adoption paperwork. Matthias was granted protective custody and placed temporarily in Keller's care. The process was fast-tracked due to the trauma, and no one questioned his intentions. Naomi and Linda became part of the unofficial family that formed around him. Valeria, now under psychiatric care and reunified with a long-lost aunt in Arizona, remained in close contact, her therapy interwoven with Matthias. The boy spoke little in those early weeks. He slept with the lights on, jumped at the sound of sirens, and couldn't touch metal utensils without trembling. But he found solace in one thing: drawing. Keller had given him a sketch pad and some colored pencils, not thinking much of it. But within days the pages began to fill with images, not of monsters or pain, but of children. Dozens of them, each with different eyes, different hair, different faces, but always the same eyes of fear and hope. One morning, Keller walked into the kitchen to find Matthias silently sketching a girl with a blue ribbon. She was in the third bed, the boy said softly. I think she's still dreaming. Keller sat beside him. We'll find her, I promise. Matthias looked up, eyes clearer than they had ever been. There's more, he said. I don't remember everything, but when I draw, I see them. And just like that, the mission shifted again. What began as one boy's survival became a map, a living archive of the invisible. Matthias, now free, had become a witness, and through his drawings, the ghost of the pipeline began to speak. If this story moved you, consider subscribing for more powerful narratives inspired by real shadows of the world. Leave a comment below. What moment hit you the hardest? And where in the world are you watching from? Your voice matters.